So, hello everyone and welcome to this installment of Truth Noir. I'm joined once again by my guest host. You've seen him before, Dirk Beechum. Glad to have him back. And so yeah, we already know Dirk. He's a friend of the show.
Yeah.
He's a friend of humanity. So what we're talking about today is a little bit of an extension on our what we called cognitive dissonance a few episodes ago. And this is the concept of holding two completely contrary thoughts and believing them both to be true. Before we talked about how mass media and propaganda, all of these things conspire to put us in that state all of the time, to where you have these notions of, well, the cops are right all the time, but yet they murder a bunch of unarmed people. And
what do you call that?
Cognitive dissonance, where and it's not just that. And I'm not saying all cops are bad. I want to stress this every time I say it.
I was thinking of is just the other day I was talking to this guy in the park, and this is, to me, you said two beliefs that don't go together, but they hold on to them very hard, and they don't see that there's a ridiculousness in it. He was telling me that how he felt that Jesus hates Social Security, hates welfare, hates WIC, which is Women's, Infants, and Children's, the feeding program.
Right, like the food stamp
hates
program,
anything.
right?
Yeah, hates anything like that. And I go, so he hates the poor? He hates the elderly? And he goes, no, he loves the poor. He loves the elderly. I go, then why do you think he hates Social Security? Well, don't you know? And he's like looking at me like I'm the idiot. I'm like thinking, hey, Social Security feeds the elderly and the disabled.
Yeah, pretty much.
So anyway, so that, to me, he has severe cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
And
and it goes to a level, and we're doing this one now on, and I know it's kind of a cumbersome title, but I'm calling it Societal Oxymorons, because these are notions that people have that are oftentimes held by maybe not entire nations, but definitely by very large groups of people. And it's because of the same reasons. It's either because of your favorite news channel spins things a certain way, or the church that you go to says, well, you need to vote a certain way, and they're pushing a political agenda on you that may oftentimes be contrary to your own personal ethics.
yeah.
And so we have a few examples of that, and the reason why I wanted to do another episode of along these lines is because I think it's really important that people start to realize the kind of hypocrisies of some of these things, and also realize that it's not their fault. Like, a lot of these contrary notions are pushed on people from completely what you think are different angles. Maybe the news is telling you something different from what your church is telling you, but at the end of the day, they're mostly controlled by the same people. And the reason why these things are being presented to you in this way is to create this kind of internal conflict within you. And so that's why we have the picture of the green stop sign to start off with, because it's an easy one. It's green means go, right? But the shape of the sign is also universally recognizable, at least in America, as a stop sign.
Yeah.
And so
the word stop.
It's like that scene in the movie Rain Man where Dustin Hoffman is playing the guy with autism, and he's at the intersection, and he wants to cross the street, and he sees the flashing red hand. Mm-hmm. And so when the hand is off, he takes a couple steps, and then when the red hand comes up, because it's flashing, because the light's getting ready to change, and so he does this stop and go thing, and he stops traffic because eventually the hand just goes to, the solid stop sign, and people are getting mad at him when really all he's doing is exactly what the sign was telling him to do.
Yeah.
And this is the same thing that I think society does in many various regards. And how much progress did Dustin Hoffman make during that period of time? Not very much. Until someone presented to him the notion that, like, hey, you need to move forward, regardless of what the sign says. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere. And so, yeah, man, that's what we're here talking about today. I know Dirk's got a couple examples of this kind of thing that goes on. But I feel like there are, let's see, what do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 major institutions in this country, and we're going to, talk about them. One of them is religious, like your church, what they tell you, and how it may or may not disagree with some other, ethics that you have. Political, education system, healthcare system, and prison and the police system, and how all of people's attempts to analyze this and debate each other are basically just two sides of the same coin, being like, taking the police argument, about people are saying, well, Black Lives Matter, and the police shouldn't be murdering unarmed black people for no reason. And then there's the other side that says, well, all lives matter. We'll get into that in a little bit, but it basically creates a system where nothing is accomplished because everyone is just trading their catchphrases back and forth and not really engaging in a critical inspection of what the problem actually is. So the first one up, and as always, the pictures are out of order, so we'll see what we come up with first. Healthcare. All right, cool. So, Dirk, what are your thoughts on healthcare in America and in the world at large?
Well, it's slightly getting better in America. It still has a long way to go. Before Barack Obama became president, the wisdom was that my son was poor enough to get Medi-Cal, but that his mother and I weren't. And then under Obama, we all three now, which we still make the same low income, but we still all
qualify.
Yeah, so now I can, I have some coverage. So yeah, it's it's a shame that we have people making money off of a medical system that nobody else makes money off of, in a way. I mean, the last 3 CEOs of Blue Cross, or whatever the name is that is owned by Blue Cross.
Yeah, I think it's Anthem now.
Yeah. They would work 3 to 5 years and they would take home $1 billion. $1 billion. And no other country has this kind of middleman who just siphons huge amounts of money off of and does nothing. He's not a doctor, he's not a nurse, he's not an administrator for said. He just siphons off the money. He just,
Well, his function in the company is he figures out ways to cut corners and cut people's benefits.
And then it goes into his pocket. But here's the thing. These people have so much money, and other people like them, there's just these few CEOs, they have enough money, hundreds of millions, that they can peel off a couple million and toss them to a politician and the guise of campaign finance, and then and they can get the politician like Boner, Senator Boner, to say, well, it's horrible what happened, because here's what happened. While the standard of living went up under affordable health care, the Affordable Health Care Act, while standard of living went up, my standard of living went up, and most American standard of living went up, the death rate went down from people not being able to go see a primary care physician.
Sure.
Even all these benefits, the rich who run Kaiser and Blue Cross and everything, their money went down a little bit. Oh, by the way, it never affected a nurse's wages, a doctor's wages, or even any other administrator that works. But it made their profit go down, but they're still filthy rich, and they're still making money in a way that nobody in Europe could make money. So it is like Obama overnight got rid of the system. These rich people who are making money by doing nothing, not inventing anything, they're not working in the drug industry, they're not working in the medical industry, they're just still siphoning money. They're just not siphoning as much, and that difference has gone straight, not just a little bit, but every single penny that was taken out of their profit, they're still making 90% of their profit. But that 10% of their profit is now going back into actually saving lives. And it's provable and it's testable, and yet it's not enough for them. They're angry. They're like little children, and they constantly run commercials, and they constantly are all over AM radio, flooding these, paying these DJs, because nobody's that stupid. Tim Conway Jr. and Rush Limbaugh, nobody's that stupid to really believe that the horrible Health Care Act, nicknamed Obamacare, is bad. But you don't get it. You don't get to keep your job unless you say that.
Right.
Well,
yeah, and it's hard for it's hard for Rush Limbaugh to say no because he's a high school dropout.
Yeah, where's he going to go?
Yeah, what else is he going to do? I mean, he'd probably find his next set of abominations to be in favor of on the radio, but.
Yeah, these guys would lose their job, and they can't go to another station because they're all owned, at least in California, all AM radio is owned by CBS.
Mm-hmm.
And that little experiment that they had for several years during the Bush administration and partially into the Obama administration of Air America, the liberal talk radio on AM, they shut that down. So that doesn't exist. So you have 100% of one-sided view now. And then you have that one little kind of KNX news radio that's still around, but that's but there's no liberal talk, so anyway, and you got that milk toast. You do have milk toast. I call it milk toast liberal. That's on your 89.3.
Oh yeah. So
the guy strumming a guitar, and every now and then they talk about they'll talk about they'll take some guy with a microphone and a good high quality one, and they'll go into Africa and they'll hear a tribe playing some music, and they come back and they'll go, "Isn't it great? We're all one world." And but nobody's really bashing the corporate executives or anything like they did on Air America. On Air America, they really gave them a snootful, and that's great for elementary school and high schoolers to learn. I think they do need to learn that stuff.
For sure.
But what we need to talk about is, our country's it's got problems.
Yeah,
and it results in death.
Like real holy shit kind of problems that really need to have something done about them. They're, and I don't think anyone is really endorsing let's go burn people's house down.
And I'm so surprised at how I thought we had at least made some kind of stride in prison reform, but our prisons are still horrible. They got this thing now. I thought I was educated. I didn't even know this because they start coming out in the news where they're trying to pass laws federally and at the state level to stop putting people in solitary confinement for non-violent offenses. There are people doing hard time in solitary confinement, and it isn't because they hurt another prisoner or injured a guard. It's because they got caught smoking pot, or they got caught. Caitlyn Jenner is going to go, not Caitlyn Jenner, Brad Manning is going to go do some solitary time because he got caught with a Vanity Fair magazine. And I'm like thinking, well, first of all, motherfucker, the guards gave it to him. Now what's he going to do? Is he got to do some solitary time? That's another thing. How did the fuck did he get a magazine? And how did the marijuana guy get the marijuana? You get it from the guards. My thing is hey, start firing some guards. Hey, the minute I would see somebody with a Vanity Fair magazine and you didn't want him to have it, I would have to say, you know what? Who was on shift? And who's ever on shift, I'd fire his ass. And you know what? You do that just a couple times.
Yeah, and some things would start changing. Just like if you actually held police officers accountable for murder when it was shown that no, they actually just killed an unarmed person who was not being violent, there would be some things changed pretty quick. But instead what they do is they put them on paid administrative leave, and they do an internal investigation, and they find that these people did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And then when people say, hey, you know what, that's really messed up, that shouldn't be happening, all you get is the other side saying, well,
His job is tough.
Police officers had a tough job, and well, you know, he was in fear for his life. And I wonder at the, honestly, and I'm not saying this is all of them, but I really genuinely wonder at the fucking coward who is going to know that a person is unarmed and shoot them anyways.
You know what I think, though?
It's not right.
Here's my thing, is that these guys are on, my contention is this, is that, say like the Fullerton police, for example.
Sure.
Who killed that guy.
Oh my goodness, his name is escaping me. I feel like a jerk.
Yeah, me too. Anyway, so he died a couple years ago. Anyway, those guys were not sober. That's another thing. For you to pull out a gun and say if you go, oh, what's going on here? And someone comes by, what the fuck? And you shoot like one time, that's a guy who's overworked, he's a normal guy, and he's stressed.
Right.
But when you guys got one guy, I'm going to kick your ass, and one guy starts pulling up the gloves, and the other guys just come in, and they're like loosening up. And
they're warming up for it.
These guys are not sober. I'm sorry, but when you have that, and they knew this guy, by the way, they arrested him before. It wasn't like he was a stranger, but they had roid rage.
Is it Kelly Thomas?
Yeah, Kelly Thomas.
Yeah.
And they, my thing is this: we need to stop saying that a cop, because by the way, in my refinery, where I used to work in a refinery, and in any other job that has safety like that, the minute somebody causes an accident, you don't go, hey, he's my brother. You go, bam, here's a piss test. Here. And if it found out that you failed it, then the union starts backing off and saying, well, you know what, you shouldn't have came in fucking high, and then you're going to operate that piece of equipment. That's the same thing they have to start doing to cops. We have to stop having that it was a cop that killed Kelly Thomas. It was a guy who on roid rage, and maybe he was doing a little meth too to stay up on those night shifts, and it was a drug addict that killed him. And once you start doing that, the police union can back away and say, you know what, we don't have to stand up for drug addicts, because, by the way, no other system does. Like I said, no refinery does, no dairy, no brewery, no simple consumer driving on the freeway gets protection like that. No, the athletics. You know, anytime you're in any kind of a game where there's any kind of, you know, not just the Olympics, but much lower level games, even in high school or college, the minute you're constantly tested, and when you flunk, the system pulls back and isolates you and says, you know what, you broke the rules, and now you don't get special treatment anymore, and you know. Yeah,
you don't get to play anymore. You don't
get to keep your awards.
Yeah, you don't get a paid vacation like they're giving these assholes.
And so the same thing with cops. They have to start cracking on the cops. The minute you get into some kind of a violent confrontation where it's questionable, we need a blood test. A blood test, and there's plenty of them out there that can tell if the cop had been doping, and they'll know if he's on steroids. And if he's on steroids, then I'm sorry, that is, you know,
it should be as unacceptable as it is in any other job field.
Yeah,
and the arguments of, well, you know, they put their lives on the line has absolutely nothing to do with that.
Because then it'll be like, well, wait a minute. A lot of cops put their lives on the line, and they don't get high before they come into work. You know, a lot of cops do. And that's why most cops aren't that violent, because they aren't strung out, you know. So we have to get the cops that are sober to stand up and say, you know what, that isn't my brother over there in Fullerton, you know, because he fucking got juiced up and he couldn't handle his roid rage, and then he had to, you know.
Yeah,
I think that might, you know, start cracking down on this.
They can be your brother all you want them to be, And then you know what? Sometimes what do brothers do? Sometimes they got to show each other some tough love and be like, all right, hey, look, jackass.
You got to go into EAP. You got to get off the at least off the force, or at least off the streets for a while.
You're going to get detoxed.
You got to go to rehab and
maybe fighting crime isn't for you if you can't go out and do it and refrain from murdering someone.
Yeah.
Real simple.
Or you can't face the day without getting high and fucked up, you know.
Yeah, so equality, right? It comes down to that. What's the best for everyone? Well, let's treat everyone that performs a job the same as anyone else who performs a job. Like if you murdered someone on the job, they they would investigate.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And not just say they investigated, but actually investigate, and maybe come to some conclusions that would keep people safe in the future instead of just putting these horrible people back on the streets. And again, not all of them, but I would say many.
So Project, yeah. So I guess we'll have to look it up on Facebook. I think it's on Facebook. Project Conspiracy, the movie I saw.
Yeah,
at the
man.
Film Festival.
Well, that's
him
it's
and I
kinda...
worked together at the Action on Film Festival, and it's a great festival, and it happens every year in the summer or late summer in Monrovia.
Yeah, great venue for independent filmmakers, whether you're making shorts or feature lengths, to come out and show your work and have it judged by a panel, because judgment, right? But yeah, there were a couple excellent examples of this, and one of them was that film Fullerton. That was a documentary of the family of Kelly Thomas, the guy that was murdered by the Fullerton Police Department.
And it was titled Murder in Fullerton.
Yeah, because that's exactly what it was. Now I want to move on to some other things, but yes, yeah, go support your local independent filmmakers. They come out with good stuff. And Murder in Fullerton was a excellent documentary of exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about. So let's see, what else do we have? We have Donald Rumsfeld.
Oh,
so yeah,
war criminal.
War criminal and manufacturer of poison, as it turns out.
Oh yeah, he's involved with Monsanto, right?
Yeah, Monsanto, and he was the CEO of G.D. Searle Pharmaceuticals, which were responsible in part for making aspartame. But yeah, basically, my point here is with healthcare is that we are falling way, way behind on this. And when people that are educated look into these things and say, well, what is different about the American healthcare system as it existed, I don't know, let's call it 10 years ago, and what they're doing in places that are far outreaching us in terms of life expectancy, like Japan and most of Europe, and places like this that have these fantastic healthcare systems, and even in Cuba, as it turns out, they find that there is no charge for healthcare, it's government subsidized, and there's not these death panels, right, that that stupid bitch Sarah Palin was saying, would happen if Obamacare were implemented. And let's not make any mistakes, like the Universal Health Care Act is not perfect. There's some tweaking that could be done with it, but that being said, it was severely compromised, and that was done on purpose. It would not have been passed through the House and the Senate if the people who were staunchly opposed to it weren't allowed to noodle around in the text of the legislation and change some things just to make it a little bit worse because they're assholes.
Yeah.
This would have been a stepping stone, and I hope that it still is, but it was meant to be a stepping stone to a system that would be on par with the things and the way they do things in Japan and Europe, where they have very much higher life expectancies than us in America. You know, but yet when you ask people, hey, is this what you want? Is this, you want it the way they have it in, you know, Europe and other places where people are like way healthier and happier? And it's that same propaganda machine that says, you know, no, you don't want this. That's socialism. You don't want things like they were in Russia in the 50s, do you? So, all right, so we got healthcare, I think we beat prison and police to death.
Pardon the pun.
Yeah, literally.
We beat them to death.
But yeah, except to say one other thing is that, yeah, like, you know, we have this for-profit prison system where it's in their best interest to keep you inside.
That's another heartbreaker. People just wasting away for no reason, just so.
It's not.
There's been a few victories. In some states, there was a couple guys that had to pay fines because they were. It was noticeable that their sentencing of their prisoners was greater than the same prisoners of equal sentence in other you know, in a public prison system.
Yeah.
But you know, it's the threat is still out there and it's still looming, and it's a horrible thing, you know. So also one thing I advocate for is everybody should get at least a free phone call once a month from there. They have this thing now where it's getting more and more expensive to where prisoners can't communicate anymore. And
Yeah, with their families.
yeah, they have access to a phone, but they can't afford the phone call.
Well, yeah, and this is another interesting statistic that I
sad,
found
that's
is
sad.
that when they send these guys out to perform labor, these whatever money that they earn, like if they're not paying, you know, damages to, you know, some family or individual, and they're just working to have money in their commissary account, the money that they make in a day is something on the order of like $1.
Yeah.
If they work an 8-hour hard labor shift, they make $1, but the cost of a phone call for a minute is way more than that.
Yeah, yeah. And so most people can't call out, and I think they should call out for free. That's what I think.
You know, and it turns into a health issue also because, like, yeah, the prison will feed you, but if you want to like brush your teeth, you need to pay into the commissary for like toothpaste or, you know, things of that, like hygiene products. And so if you're doing any amount of time in there, you're going to have some, you know, some dental health issues probably when you come out if you're, you know, not working it off in one way or another.
Yeah.
And even then, you're not going to consistently have access to these things. And the old tired argument of, well, you know, you broke the law, you know, fuck you, is really not valid anymore because these are not on the whole, or I would argue even for the most part.
Most people are still not violent. We still have like 60% of people in prison are non-violent.
Yeah, these are not dangerous people. They'll be dangerous people when they come out because of the things that happen to them.
Yeah, so this,
you know.
yeah, we still have a long way to go.
So it's one of these.
But
things
it's always so
where,
funny how most people go to church. They just sleep so good. I mean,
yeah,
these neighbors
because they pray for the inmates instead of you know, insisting that something
and they don't
be
talk
done.
about it in their church. Their minister doesn't talk about it in their church, you know. And if I were to bring it up to them, like, oh, you weren't that good of a Christian, they would look at me like,
I go to church every Sunday.
yeah, they go,
how dare you say that to
I
me?
don't, you know, smoke or drink or, you know, and it's like.
But actually, you know what?
Yeah, but if you're not really worrying about bettering someone's life, then, you know, I'm sorry, you know, it's there's like this family that lives next to me. I'll call them the what name will I give them? Of the typhus family.
Oh yeah,
I'll call them the typhus family. And they live next to me. They went to Azusa Pathetic University. Actually, it's Azusa Pacific University.
Right, a Christian college out here in California.
And so, and you know, they'll donate a box of food once in a while to some, I don't know what food bank, probably not the public one, something for the church. But they, you know, they don't care about Social Security. They don't care about, the guy told me one time, he's got a master's degree in education. And I remember he was telling me he was trying to help out this one woman, and she had three kids, and she had a drug abuse problem. And he says, "Oh yeah, well, sad thing, she died." And I found out through him. I go, "So yeah, we were working with her for a couple of years, and then she had another kid, and then she died." And I go, "Why'd she have another kid? Didn't you get her on birth control if you're working with her?" And he goes, "Well, this guy with a master's degree from Azusa Pacific University."
We don't do that. We're Christians.
And he goes, "Well," I go, "You didn't tell her to use the abstinence-only program, did you?" And he goes,
Yep.
"Well, yeah." And then I go, "And by the way, what kind of treatment program was she in? Was she going to AA meetings? Was she going to some NA meetings? What kind of program was she working to stay off drugs?"
We just told her to stop.
Yeah, we just told her to pray about it. I go, "And how well did that work?" And he goes, and he's all like upset with me, and it's just like, dude, basically you got to take a little responsibility. I mean, some people are just going to die anyway of drug abuse, but
Right.
you got to take a little responsibility that you never gave her shit. And by the way, how did you not know that not getting her on birth control wasn't what she needed to do? How did you not know? You know.
Well, it's another one of those cognitive dissonances that
So,
you take this tiny passage in the Bible that talks about, and I think
and it's vague too.
and it's ancient and out of date and completely irrelevant. Like, I love how when Christians are talking about how they're all against homosexuality because it says so in the book of Leviticus or Deuteronomy.
I like what somebody calls the Bible the Bronze Age book.
Yeah, well, and that's
It's not
exactly
even a
what it
Steel Age
was.
book. It's a Bronze Age book.
And then you get into these arguments of and you say, well, the Old Testament also talks about how you should go about selling slaves, or how you should put someone to death if you catch them picking up sticks on a Saturday, or if they have a tattoo. And then you get the argument of, or you get the history lesson of, well, man, it was a different time, and societal values were a little bit different. It's like, well, then what the fuck are you sticking up and making a big deal out of this one thing for? Whether it's abortion, whether it's abortion, or whether it's gay rights, or whether it's anything.
But there'll be more over the time, whether I'm on your guest or I'm on the guest on Adam's show, about the typhuses, Mr. and Mrs. Typhus.
Well, yeah,
That'll
absolutely.
be my ongoing little story, funny little thing, and I want people to eventually come up to me on the streets and go, "Hey, how's that, Mr. Typhus?"
How are the typhuses
I'll
doing?
know I'm getting to you guys. So I
you
got
know.
more stories. So God bless.
But my favorite one is so oftentimes I'll hear people that are very conservatively religious talking about how, well, in church, we learned about how the GOP is gonna really crusade for Christian values in this nation, and among them is, well, we got to ease off the restrictions on corporations and we got to deregulate everything because that's going to be good for America, which there has never been any
It shows to me that churches
there's never been any time in American history where that has worked out well.
That they have sprinkled in them provocateurs that are hired and bought and paid for by corporations.
Well,
and,
yeah, I think all
he's
of
not
these.
in every little church, but any big church where, like, ministers always go off on little retreats, and they meet with other ministers. That's how.
Right, and they talk about what agendas they're going to push.
But one of those ministers, or whoever's putting on the retreat, he's passing himself off as a minister, but he happens to be always hitting hard about some kind of thing that's pro-corporate,
right,
and anti-labor, and that'll always be the thing. And he's a spy and a provocateur, and it's not. I'm not being outrageous. I mean, it's like there was a guy who came when I was going to the Pasadena Church of Christ in the early '90s, and there was this weird guy that came from Pepperdine, because Pepperdine kind of oversees those kind of churches.
Okay.
The Church of Christ. And this weird kind of Korean guy came in, some big, mucking him up professor, theology professor from Pepperdine, and we were picking ministers. So we were testing out several ministers. Some were getting from in-house, some from the community. And they would speak for 1 or 2 Sundays, then we get someone else. And they were kind of overseeing it to kind of give their blessing on it.
Right.
But this guy, every now and then he would get up and talk a little bit before the sermon. And one time he gave a sermon for this guy from Pepperdine. And he was all hot on this weird thing about that the earth was 6,000 years old.
Right.
And he was really adamant. And it was almost to the point where it was nonsensical. And I took him aside one day and I said, well, what does it matter how old the earth is? Does it have anything to do with God or Christ? And he looked at me, and when he realized that I was educated enough, he goes, and he walked away because he knew he wasn't going to win that debate. But it was interesting that people who really believe in the debate will argue with me. They'll get upset. You're a lay person who actually believes in that nonsense.
Right.
But a person who's just there to go fishing because he's paid to go fishing and learn to set up certain things, he's not going to waste his time with me. Because I'm going to waste the time to him. But he went around to other people, and he was searching out certain people that will spew that back out. There's other people who go, oh, really? Yeah. And he goes, yeah, and you got to make sure that you tell your next time you're in Bible class, you tell people that. See, that way you have what's called non-issues, where there's all these arguments, but no real discussions ever get talked about.
Right.
You know, I talked to one person one time, and he kept saying, well, why do you think the Earth's 4 billion years old? And I said, and he was all hot on the 6,000 year thing. And I said, you know what? If we talked about this for the next 2 hours,
there would be no progress made.
And let's just say one of us won the other one over. You know what we didn't talk about for the last 2 hours? And he goes, what's that? I go,
the teachings
poverty,
of Jesus.
Poverty.
And how?
Poverty, how we're supposed to feed more poor people. And he goes, oh. And he goes like that. I go,
yeah, mind blown.
You know. And he was like, well, I go, so in other words, we're talking about bullshit. Why don't we talk about things that will actually make less autistic kids next year be born? Now that is a conversation, but that's a conversation that's not happening in churches.
Absolutely.
They're talking about other nonsensical bullshit, and so.
Well, yeah, you know, and the one thing I was going to bring up
and they're designed to talk about nonsensical because it's not like an accident that every church happens to be a fuck up when it comes to having a decent conversation in an open forum. It isn't. It's not like an accident. It's that there's specifically someone sends in some person, and you used to hear about these churches every now and then would come up in the early 2000s when we were going into Iraq, and then every now and then you'd see them on the news. Some guy minister go, you know what? I don't think Jesus likes war, and I don't think he likes this war. But you know what? I bet you that guy never lasted long. Because there'd be some other minister, the next time he went on a retreat, they'd say, you know what, Norm? I don't think you're
praying enough.
Yeah, I think you're getting too angry about this. It's like, dude, what? And then it would be that round robin. And next thing you know, he wouldn't get funding because most churches, believe it or not, here's another thing. I got a paper on this one time and I lost it. Most churches, especially you see all these little churches up and down here, they don't make money. How they keep the lights on is that there's organizations in America that go to each church, and when you need money, they give you enough money to keep your electricity on, to pay for the rent of the property, to get enough books and Bibles and hymn books in. So you know that if that little guy gets some real uppity fucking liberal minister who says he's anti-war, do you think he's going to get a paycheck?
Yeah, their church is going to get shut down.
Yeah, you know. And eventually, some of the deacons, when they hear about, well, why are you losing us funding? And you know they'll go to one of the deacons and they'll go, well, it's because Norm talks too much about that anti-war stuff. And then they'll go like that. And next thing you know, you walk in a room and the deacons are going, you know what, we think we don't want you to minister anymore. Well, why? Why aren't I being able to minister? Nah, you know, we're not feeling it.
Right.
You know, it's really dirty and sinister and subversive. But that's, I think, how the Christian church is run in this country.
Yeah, and it's the exact opposite of the way it should be.
Yeah, I think if Jesus saw, would just be appalled.
Well, you know, I mean, you know this stuff. When is the only time in the Bible Jesus ever got pissed off and like actually violent?
Yeah,
with someone. It was when the
money changers were fucking over the working man.
Yeah, and so he flipped their tables over and he chased them around with whips, which is a good, next time you're asking yourself, what would Jesus do? As it turns out, flipping tables over and whipping motherfuckers isn't out of the question. Just
like the Federal Reserve. If Jesus came down, I would be worried. If you saw Jesus outside of the Federal Reserve, you gentlemen and ladies in there, and I use the term loosely when I said gentlemen and ladies, you blood-sucking thieves, I would be worried. I would just be worried.
Yeah, and so if you're going to a church and they're telling you, well, you know, we need to put these people in office, and those people that your church is all about are saying, well, yeah, we need to ease restrictions on the banks, and we need to take all the regulations away. You're not going to a Christian church. Like, not really. It may have a crucifix in front, but the person who is ministering to you is not someone who gets it. Yeah. And that person doesn't walk with Christ.
Yeah.
Well, no, you know, and I wouldn't even say that, you know, but it's a little comedy from our producer Nolan in the back. But
well, he's our landlord.
Pretty much, yeah. So yeah, of course he's Jewish.
Yeah.
But no, like all joking aside, I think the tenements of any decent faith, Judaism included, you know, they all talk about the same basic tenements of brotherhood and treating your neighbor with love and respect and taking care of
the least among us.
The person who is most underprivileged. And Christianity says that, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism all say these things, and that's why they're all righteous philosophies. It's when you allow those philosophies to turn into corporations, and they're going to start acting like corporations. And what did all of your main characters say? Whether it was the Old Testament Joseph or whether it was Jesus or Buddha or Krishna, they all said you don't need the church to be a person of faith, to be a righteous individual. And so when you start recognizing your church or your government or your church government as the the theocracies of the past and present were, it is your righteous duty to stop supporting them and to continue doing the same righteous thing that whatever your favorite main character of your book of philosophy was, keep doing that.
Yeah.
Just because you don't go to church doesn't mean, or you don't support a certain church's ideology because it's different from Jesus's or whatever other holy figure that is present in your faith. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person or a bad Christian or Buddhist or any of these things. You're probably the one that's right if you're asking questions like that. Like, hey, why don't we talk about what we can do to stop war? Catholic Church that has the most wealth and the largest land holdings of any religion in the world. They are their own sovereign entity that is completely immune from any sort of...
how much acre... now, how big is the Vatican?
Well, the Vatican itself...
Is that the name of the country?
I think, it's the Vatican Papal States or something like that.
Okay.
But its land holdings are not just Vatican City.
Yeah.
It is whatever land... I'm not sure exactly what the rules are, but it's also whatever land is under the control of the Holy See. So if the Catholic Archdiocese...
So they won't land around the world.
Many huge plots of land around the world.
Yeah.
And as much as, we'll bring... because I'll call him out. Pope Francis, I think you're a better pope than Benedict, because Benedict was, he was one of our
Nazi.
Was one of our previous fuckfaces of the week. That Pope Benedict.
Yeah.
And I want to like Pope Francis, but I also don't see him as being very different from any of his predecessors for the last
he's kind of like the Obama of the Pope world. He's a little bit different, and he kind of does mention a few things.
Yeah.
But is he really gonna? He's not gonna be the Roosevelt of the Pope world, just like Obama wasn't the Roosevelt of the 21st century.
Right.
You know, where people actually got arrested for what they did, and banks really got, you know, turned around, and
well, yeah, as
you
it turns
know,
out, the government of Iceland is the Roosevelt, using your example, of the 21st century, because when the world economies went to shit, instead of throwing money at the banks, you know, to just say, okay, problem, go away,
yeah,
you know, and rewarding these assholes for the things that they did, they prosecuted the bankers who were the reason for these terrible
economic
problems that were going on in their country. And you know what? They
cleaned it up.
They were one of the worst affected, and they have
now they're doing the best.
Come to recently have the most growth from that period of time. So good job, Iceland. And honestly,
yeah, we should have arrested a lot of our bankers.
Going back to you know, Pope Francis here, I want to just say, I'm not going to make him a fuckface of the week, but I would say to him, like, look, guy, you have a hell of a lot going for you, and yeah, maybe you make a public show of not being flamboyant, like you don't carry the giant golden crucifix around like Benedict did, and you dress in more simple clothing, but that seems to be the extent of the changes that you've made, because you still have access to all of these land holdings. You could make you know, huge communities and provide free housing for all of, or at least many of the homeless people of the world, and you could use the vast resources of your sovereign nation state to make a real difference in the world and end poverty and provide clean drinking water to everyone in the world.
Yeah.
Because those are the trillions of dollars that you have access to. But instead, you know, we see you hanging out with the Rothschilds. I meant to try to find a picture of it and I couldn't, but you know, he's a CEO of a corporation, and as it turns out, I don't really see him acting that much differently than any other.
Supposedly he talked to that nutcase that didn't want to do her job and hand marriage licenses to gay people.
Now they're doing damage control on that.
And then they so I guess he didn't talk to her?
Well, no,
he did talk to her.
I believe he did. I think he actually met with her, but like,
it wasn't as positive as she's making it out.
According to his people, he was set up. Like, someone made that appointment for him to go do, and that he was not aware that that was the person he was going to see.
Oh, so he went soft on her when he wanted to go harder on her. Because in the end, it kind of inadvertently gave her a blessing that she was okay. Because he didn't really know the issue, that she was being a fuck up. And then he also talked to Boner. Now he already knows enough, but Boner's an anti-poor, you know, loves taking food and medicine away from children. So I wonder what he said to Boner. You know.
Well, you know, I don't know, and that's why I'm not really calling out Francis, because
you know, that's funny
because Boehner he retired. He retired the next day after he met.
He did,
or committed to retiring after a certain point in time. But yeah, he said he
said, dude, listen, you're getting paid to tell these lies. These lies. if you want to go to, if you think there's a hell, you're going to go to hell, because you can't just go, well, I did go against Christ's teachings, but I got paid to go against Christ's teachings. You still don't get into heaven. That's not like an excuse.
Yeah.
You know. So when Boner says, yeah, but I got paid big money to go against Christ's teachings, and then Paul says, I know. You got paid a lot of money, and money's money. Hey, you're talking to the Pope here.
You're missing the big picture here, bud.
Yeah.
So
you're still gonna burn in flames.
I hate to cut us off, man, but we're getting the light here. So I want to thank Dirk Beechum once again for being on my show and coming on and talking to me about these important things. And as always, friends and neighbors, wherever you're going, get there safe. We'll see you next time. Take care.